I'm joining you this afternoon from Botswana. I'm not sure if I'm already sharing. Are my slides visible or I didn't share?
You didn't share, please.
Oh, okay, sorry, let me just. Okay, so as I was saying, I am Dintle Molusiwa. I am a lecturer at the University of Botswana in the Department of Family Medicine and Public Health. So joining you this afternoon from Gaborone. And so good afternoon, good morning to all of you that are joining us this afternoon. Please let me know if the background noise from my end is a little bit too high so that I may try to find a better place. I'm sitting in a very noisy construction place. I'm just going to share my video very briefly, and then I will turn it off just to try and optimize my connectivity. I'll just briefly just to say hi to everyone. And then I will switch it off to ensure it's optimal. Right. So this afternoon, we want to bring to you as part of the CISTEC Africa webinar series that we've been doing since last year. I trust that Gina has been able to take you through what CISTEC Africa is trying to do, especially perhaps for some of you that might be joining us for the first time. But we certainly do hope that for many of you, this is a repeat of you joining this community of practice that we have established in the continent, but also to try and build capacity towards systems thinking regionally, and of course to try and reach as far as we are able to. This session this afternoon, I want to try to make it very interactive because by nature of what we are doing, really it's something that we all perhaps have done one way or another. And maybe the only thing that was missing in our reflective practice in our day-to-day life and day-to-day activities was that perhaps we did not have a very clear and facilitated process of doing that reflection. So that's essentially what I would like to engage you on this afternoon. For the most part, most of our past series have largely concentrated on us sharing theoretical concepts and understanding that really introduces you to the notion of systems thinking and its application in health. So what I'm going to try to do today is, for those of you, again, who have been with us, and perhaps some of you who now have an appreciation of systems thinking, the understanding that there are various tools, even as we spoke to them the previous series or the previous seminar that we had, that there are multiple tools that you can draw from that can allow you to really be systematic in the way that you look at problems, in the way that you implement interventions in the health system, in a way that recognizes that there are often multiple actors and multiple relationships that interact in the system to ensure that even when we do the activities and the interventions that we do on one end of the system, we are also cognizant of the fact that the effect of that intervention can have, a domino effect across the entire system. And so reflective practice is simply one of those approaches that we can draw from to continue this understanding and this way of doing in the health system that draws from appreciating the fact that we understand the complexity of the environment in which we are practicing, whether you are working as a pharmacist, whether you are working as a public health specialist, or whether you are working as a practitioner by the bedside. And so I would implore that this afternoon, even as you might have your notes, just take a laid back sit and engage with us in terms of drawing, especially from your own experience, in terms of how you have learned to grow your own practice, to grow your own profession, in terms of how you learn from your experiences and use that experience to improve what you might want to do in the future. Because essentially, that's what I would love to submit this afternoon to you, that's really what reflective practice is all about, how we learn from our past experiences in order to be able to improve our future even as we go forward. So to just make sure that we are in that relaxed and interactive mode, I would like for us to look at these two pictures and just tell me what you see in this picture and what you think is happening in this picture, or what might happen in these pictures. Anyone, just unmute yourself and give us your thoughts.
Yeah, can I say
Yes,
something?
please go ahead.
Yeah, I think both pictures are two different, let me say, environments. But one thing they have in common is that there is interaction going on. There is some engagement. There is some back and forth. Ideas being shared, and kind of some kind of maybe reflecting on certain things that they all share in common. Like that, some kind of there's an interaction going on. There is communication,
Great.
Yeah.
Interaction, communication, engagement are some of the things that we are able to see or to read from these pictures. Anybody else? What other thoughts are being provoked as you look at the pictures? Sorry, please go ahead.
Hello. In the first picture, you notice that the participants are really concerned, discussing an issue, and they are very attentive to each other. The second picture is of people who are in a relaxing mode. And I think they are enjoying some drink.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I can obviously see straight away. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. So you are bringing in one other aspect in there. The fact that when you look at these two pictures, you can also be able to see some sort of feelings or emotions that people are demonstrating. One of happiness, and the other one where people are engaging in a more formal manner. So one word that we might have for both pictures is a debrief. You could have, on the one hand, colleagues in a team that are coming together at the end of a shift, or that are coming together at the start of a shift to brief one another on what needs to happen, or to debrief one another on how everything went on that particular day. On the other hand, on the other picture, again, you could still have a group of workers that are coming together at the end of a work shift, and they decide that they are going to, before they proceed home, they're going to go through a pub and have a debrief, be able to laugh about some of the moments that they experienced during the day in the workplace. So we already begin to see here a deliberate process that people choose to use for them to be able to sit down and learn together, whether formal or informal. And I want to submit to all of us this afternoon, even as we sit around, to say that this is something that we often tend to do, and something that, even though we may not have the tools at the moment, or even the systematic way of how we engage, that this is something that we often do. This is something that often informs our practice and how we move forward even in the workplace. So we are going to try this afternoon to try and look at reflective practice in a systematic way, to learn how we can be able to draw from it to make it more systematic and align it with what we do on a day-to-day basis, depending on the different activities and different roles that we might be playing in our different organizations. We titled this particular session, Reflective Practice for Quality Improvement. And, so for me, linking these two together is really just to try and point out, as we will probably hear from some of you that are familiar with quality improvement models, that the biggest part of quality improvement hinges on taking a moment to learn from what we have been implementing and seeing whether improvement has happened, how that improvement has come about, and what we might do based on what the data that we are assessing of that improvement is telling us. So maybe before we transition to that, let us perhaps have a similar appreciation of how we might define reflection or reflective practice. So you will see in the literature that reflective practice has been, or reflection as a way of doing, has been defined in two different ways. You can look at it as a form of thinking, or you can look at it as a form of questioning. So as a form of thinking, this is where you are considering the mental processes that you often use to fulfill a purpose or to achieve some anticipated outcome. And these are often applied to a relatively complicated or unstructured ideas for which most times there is not really an obvious solution. And you often base this mental process on the desire to continuously process this, to try and understand, what is happening, the experiences that you've had, and perhaps even the emotion that you possess even as you go through that mental reflection of a particular incident or a particular experience. And then as a form of questioning, some scholars have submitted that reflection is really where we understand that a lot of the professional knowledge that we have is really built on the experiences that we obtain in practice. And this can only happen by the fact that we are often able to reflect on that particular practice. We are deliberate, we are conscious, we are systematic about that reflection. And we do it in a manner that we are able to identify the learnings or the patterns of learnings that we can utilize to try and improve even as we move forward. So whether you look at it as a form of thinking or whether you look at it as a way of questioning your own practice and development, the idea is that there is a deliberate and systematic way of how you engage it. So one of the things that perhaps we want to appreciate is that reflection often it involves thinking a little bit more in depth, because there are a sequence of questions that you ask yourself. It allows you to really think a little bit more in depth, to be critical about, whether it is the feeling that you had at a particular point, whether, you really look a little bit in depth in terms of what you believe you learned, or the patterns that are emerging from the experience that you have gone through. But all in all, it really involves, for the most part, a state where there is a sense of doubt, or there is hesitation, there is perplexity, or some mental difficulty in which your thinking originates from. And it can also involve an act of searching, or when you really do have the desire to inquire, to try and find out, you know, information that can help you to resolve whether it's the doubt or whether it's the hesitation that, you know, put you in a place where you begin to wonder about that which you might have experienced. So I just want to pause here and see from across the room, some of you that might be familiar with quality improvement models. So when we look at the aspect of reflection and some of these concepts that we have teased out from it, does it invoke any specific activity that you do in quality improvement that you could already say, aha, this is also something that we tend to do in the quality improvement models or processes? Does anybody want to speak to that? Or maybe first of all, I should say, do we have anybody in the room who is experienced with quality improvement or has done any quality improvement projects? No? Okay, I'm gonna pick on somebody because there is somebody that I see among us who I'm hoping can be able to speak to. Is she still in?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Okay, your reflections. At what point do we tend to see ourselves sort of engaging in a reflective practice when we are doing quality improvement? If you can recall. Sorry to put you on the spot, Doc.
It's okay, Doc. I think when I reflect on particularly working in the area of cervical cancer, I would say most of the time, because you already have a monitoring and evaluation framework, you still want, whether it's, you have to define areas of where you want to see that you are still in alignment with what you first put out to do. So I think it's, you have your areas in terms of looking at processes at the end of the day, with those who are performing those activities, and trying to inquire on the challenges that they, how things went right, what went wrong, and how you can correct that. So at different times, whether you are looking at it at the end of the day, the end of the week, the end of the month, towards your objectives. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you so much. Are we all familiar with the model of improvement where we generally talk about the PDSA cycle? Anybody?
Yeah.
Okay. What does the PDA cycle involve? Anybody? So the P stands for planning, isn't it? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, and then after planning, we then have the act. So this is where you plan, you establish what it is that you want to do, and then you act on that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Are we still together? So once you have acted, then you want to study. You want to look at what it is that you have been doing, how everything has been going, what the information, or if you're collecting data, you have specific indicators that you are following. What is it telling you, isn't it? So it is in this space of studying that we see a lot of reflection. We look at what it is that we have done. In other words, we look at what has been our experience, what has been happening, how did it come about, has any changes really happened, and why did that change happen? And then from that studying, we are then able to act in terms of what it is that we are going to do next, the type of new action or different action that the adoption that we would need to take based on what we are determining from our study. So I want to submit to us this afternoon that it is in that process of, doing by way of learning from the incremental steps of change and interventions that we implement and learn from and improve, that we begin to see this process of reflection. That even though we may not think about it in the linear fashion that you may want to engage in when you are doing reflective practice, that essentially quality improvement models are in an essence a reflective practice in action that we tend to see most people drawing on. So I just want to take this moment and again try to get people to draw from their own experience, to say, if we define reflective practice as a very systematic approach to how we learn from our experiences, professional experiences, especially in this instance, because we want to do that, and we do that because we recognize that it is from our past experiences that we can be able to improve as we go forward. And why do we talk about reflective practice in the context of systems thinking? We talk about reflective practice in the context of systems thinking because we have said that one of the things that systems thinking equips you with or forces you to do is to think beyond the narrow problem that you might be viewing at any particular point in time. It really suggests to you that you need to look at the whole. And so oftentimes our experiences, because they don't happen in a vacuum, they happen in context. When we reflect back, when we look back to be able to see, what did I do? How did I do it? How did it make me feel? It allows you to really look at multiple components that might have been taking place to give you the experience that you are able to tease out from what you had gone through. And that's why we begin to say reflective practice allows us to navigate this inherent complexity that is within the health system. And it gives us the opportunity to be able to draw from these experiences and reinforce our continuous learning and our continuous improvement of our own practices. So this is the reason why we want to reflect. This is the reason why we want to draw from our experiences, because we recognize that it gives us an opportunity to understand how we were able to do things the way we did them, even within this complex adaptive system that we practice in. And this is the reason why we then emphasize the fact that in applying systems thinking within the health sector, reflective practice does matter. It does matter because how we reflect, who we reflect with, whether it is at an individual level, at group level, at organizational level, because we follow a sequence of questions when we do the reflection, we are able to look more broadly at that which we do on a day-to-day basis. Again, I'm trying to do this in a manner that I'm not just giving you theory, but I just try to speak to what I believe all of us, we tend to do one way or the other. So I just want people to take a bit of a moment and reflect on, what they normally do and where they see the opportunity in which they can be able to apply reflective thinking. whether you are a manager, a unit manager, whether you are a program manager, whether you are leading a team. Even as we go on, think about instances in which you can be able to put your team together and do a reflective practice. So we often say that reflection really is more than just thinking about an experience, but it gives the team or an individual the opportunity to describe what it is that they have been going through or what it is that they have been engaging in. And when you go through these steps of looking back into your experience, what is important is really the process rather than the content of what you will end up with. Because it is in looking back through your experiences that you begin to evoke certain feelings and emotions that either put you back in that experience and allows you to relive the moment. And it is when you are reliving that moment that you begin to experience different forms of learning from such experiences. And this is why we then say it is not just thinking about the experience, but rather how you feel, the feeling, the emotions that it brings back to you, even when you go back into that moment or that experience. And so when it is supported, we are able to appreciate that it can sharpen the skills that individuals can have to be able to do effective reflection that can really allow the teams to grow professionally in the practices that they are focused on. Most of the time, we find it also very useful when it is facilitated, so that it becomes more useful, it becomes more coordinated. Just like we do with a lot of our quality improvement initiatives. When we have a team that is dedicated to lead this process, to follow through with the learning cycles of the different multiple steps or cycles of change that we want to try out in reality, that it becomes more useful. The projects for quality improvement tend to yield more traction when they are facilitated in that manner. And so is the practice of reflection in the workplace. By way of talking to the two most basic models of reflection that are out there, obviously there are many ways that people are able to do reflection, but I'm just going to go through these two because they are the most basic, and I hope that for purposes of our learning this afternoon and because of the amount of time that we have, these are the most basic and simple to understand. And in particular, I just want to go through the Gibbs reflective cycle to simply say that he proposes a series of questions that, as a facilitator of reflective practice, you put your team through, or you put yourself through as an individual over a specific experience that you have gone through, or as a team, it might be over a particular activity that you have been engaging in and you want to sit back and debrief on it. So the first thing that you then do is you allow everybody sitting around to think through what happened. What is it that we were thinking and feeling when it happened? In that moment when we were experiencing, whether it was, implementation of a new intervention or whether we were experiencing a crisis in our facility because something happened, we take ourselves through the sequence of questions. So once you have unpacked your feelings and thinking through how you were feeling from that particular experience, you move on to try and evaluate. And in evaluation, this is where you ask the question, what was good or what was bad about this specific experience? You then analyze to see whether you are able to make any sense from that particular experience, both those good experiences and bad experiences, to see, what is it that you are able to learn from those experiences? Could you have done anything differently? Given what you might know at the point where you are at, and then from that conclusion that you make in terms of, given this information, given this understanding, given that this is what happened, I think that next time, this is what I might do differently. Now, I know even as I go through this question, people are trying to link them to practice, to link them to what you do on a day-to-day basis. So imagine as a unit manager, you have your team and you have developed a routine where on a day-to-day basis, you meet every morning to do, in some of the hospitals that we have here in Botswana, we often, they often do what they call the morning meetings, where you want to go through what might have happened the day before and what it is that we might need to be carrying forward even on the next day. So somebody who is familiar with the reflective practice steps or any one of this model can actually structure their meeting in a way that you go through these key questions. You frame them in such a way that you allow people to really relive the day before by way of getting them to really draw from those experiences and come up with, a little bit more systematic way of thinking about how we might improve what we do today that yesterday when we were doing did not give us the most optimal results that we can think we are able to attain even within the resources that we may have. So again, the idea was just to introduce you to this basic model. So this is the other model where you see a series of questions, sort of again, like those of you who might be familiar with quality improvement, you have a series of questions that you engage in that helps you to think through the activities that you are implementing so that you are able to learn from and input in terms of how you can improve even as you go forward. So I want us to come here because I know we are joining this afternoon from different organizations, different experiences. But if there is one thing that we all have perhaps experienced in a more or less similar way, is the COVID pandemic as it went through many of our countries. So I'm going to ask, I don't know whether it's you, Gina, or Andrew, who can just give us, because I see there is 34 participants in the room. That means there is about 30 participants. So if we could break the rooms into groups of 10, and we are all going to reflect on the COVID pandemic. And the way we are going to do it, we are going to look at these taxonomy of verbs or of activities that you go through when you are doing reflective practice. To think about what was our learning from the COVID pandemic as individuals. And then as we allow everybody to go through each one of these questions, we want to try to see, especially starting from analyzing, evaluating, and creating, to say, even as we draw from individual experiences, how might we bring these experiences together to allow the team to learn together and to consolidate our learning so that we are able to improve as we go forward. Because sometimes even when we are in practice, a lot of what we do, there is an individual element in the way we apply ourselves to the workplace. But we also appreciate that there is a convergence of our activities at some point in time. And so we are going to start off with the lower level where we want to leave it at an individual level. The way we will do this is we will just have a round of everybody saying, what is it that I remember with the COVID pandemic? What did I understand and why was that important for me at that point in time? So, okay. Gina, you are able to.
I did some say. Kakarino, or when?
Gina? Okay, I'm not able to mute the participants. Okay. I'm going to ask that we go into groups and just reflect from our own personal experiences. And then as we listen to members of our group, we try to see if there are any similarities in terms of our experiences, if there are any patterns that we could sort of say, this seems to have been very common in shaping our experiences of the pandemic, even though we might be sitting in different countries. And so what might we do differently given these similarities that we are seeing? And what can we do even when the next pandemic hits us next time? I don't know if that makes sense or helps people to think through this process. Is that okay for everyone? Rita, does that make sense to you before we allow people to go into groups?
Yes, it does, but just a quick one. How many are you looking at? And you have to stop sharing so I can create the groups.
Oh, I should stop sharing. I hope people are able, will we be able to send the questions to the groups? If we leave them here, okay, let me stop sharing. I'm thinking that we could just put people into groups of 10 and get them to reflect upon our how they experience the COVID-19 and just give them 15 minutes. And then we come back together for a
Why do you put the questions in the chat box?
In the chat box, okay.
Yes, and then I'll copy them into the group. So we have created a group, so group members, you may need to join so that you can have that discussion around reflecting on COVID.
Okay, so I've put the questions onto the chat, Gina.
Okay. So I'll broadcast it. So you join any group, Dinkley?
Sorry?
You can join a group now.
Ah, okay, yes, yes. Will I be able to move across the rooms just in case people need clarity? Of levels of things like analysis, evaluating and creating, we were not yet there. So I just want to gauge from across the room where the groups were to see what we can discuss.
So for my group too, we couldn't go through the whole process. I think we're more at the evaluation stage, what we did during the pandemic. That's basically what we were able to discuss.
Okay. Okay. So in the event that maybe we did not go through the entire line of questioning, from describing what happened, what we remember, to, what we were feeling in terms of our understanding and why that might have been important, what we did, and then evaluating to look at, whether it was the lockdowns, the restricted movements, the sanitations, the social distancing that we all were called on to implement, whether those worked well, whether those were very good, and then analyzing them. What I want us to reflect on, which again brings us to understanding really the value of reflective practice in the workplace and for teams, is we were all perhaps sitting in different parts of the world, and we experienced something that was similar for all of us. But our interpretation of this experience was more or less different. So when you are sitting in a team and going through the process of trying to reflect through a particular experience, what you want to be able to tease out is, because you want to apply your reflection for team learning, you want to be able to understand where the common patterns are in terms of what everybody did in the situation that you all have just experienced. Because it is in these common experiences and how you learn from them that you can then be able to move together in terms of evaluating what was working well, and therefore what you can do next in order to be able to improve. Of course, if we were doing this at an individual level, it will be very different, because you will just go through the process looking at what it meant for you. But because we want to be able to apply reflective practice as managers, as practitioners, we want to give people a platform, or we recognize that it gives our teams a platform to think critically about how they experience the workplace or the interventions that they engage in on a day-to-day basis. But we want to draw from their own individual experiences in order to consolidate them and move the team in a direction where they are all pulling together. And this is the value that reflective practice really brings over to us as practitioners in the workplace, but also practitioners that really want to employ systems thinking in the way that we do things. So for me, this exercise was not so much as in, what the team consolidated, but rather the experience, even as you were discussing among yourselves. First of all, the opportunity to have every group member being able to remember something and being able to unpack what was important about that which they remember, and where they believe that which they remember can be utilized as they see how it connects to the experiences of their team members. So reflective practice, one of the things that we emphasize in it is not so much the content of what we end up with, even as we engage in this, but rather the process that we engage in as we reflect together. By way of doing that, you already begin to see the value of it, not just to allow us to see across the organization, but also to help us build a shared and common vision for what we want to do. It gives us the opportunity to be able to draw and understand how our team members experience the day-to-day experiences of working together or practicing where they might be at. So I just want to end our discussions this after, I don't know, am I sharing or I'm not? Oh, okay, sorry. Let me. Sorry, I thought I was sharing my slides. So I just want to end my discussion with you this afternoon to think around, so what are some of the tools that I might use as a manager, as a practitioner, that can help me engage in an effective reflective practice or reflective process? First, again, as an individual, at an individual level, but when you are a manager, how might you be able to facilitate your team to be able to engage in this process as a routine way of doing? So like I was saying, some managers have been able to apply reflective practice within the context of the regular meetings that they hold in their departments. So rather than have the usual way of conducting meeting, you start off with just a simple round of these questions with, a selected member of the team that are sitting together and focusing on a specific key event or activity that has been taking place within your organization. So first of all, being able to appreciate your context and analyzing what is happening. And then using the various tools that we are all perhaps familiar with to engage in that process of reflection. But the most important thing is to say, because reflective practice is a systematic process, we don't want to be haphazard, we don't want it to be random. How might we equip ourselves so that even as we adopt this way of doing things, if we adopt this way of thinking and acting within the complex world that we engage in, what can we use to oftentimes to assist us do a very systematic and objective process of reflection? So keeping diaries, for instance, when you are a practitioner or a manager, about the whole entire experience as you go through it, how it makes you feel, the things that you are doing, what you are learning from that, what you might do differently. So you sequence your experience or your diary around those specific questions of reflection. But also on occasion, you sit together with your team and do these facilitated discussions that allows people to really think a little bit more critically and in depth about something that they have done. Documenting the things that we do together to think through what really went well and what didn't go well. So one of the things, again, those of you who might be familiar with quality improvement, is that without documenting or collecting data for the interventions that you are implementing, it becomes very difficult to learn from the intervention and see what works and what didn't work. So documenting the activities or the experiences as you go through them becomes a very pivotal element of one growing the skills and the opportunity to be able to engage in the most effective reflection that can help them to really navigate the complexity in healthcare, and therefore allowing them to really apply systems thinking in the way that they address and solve problems on a day-to-day basis. So again, my apologies. I really wanted to try to make this to be more of a conversation, a community